I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're diving into a powerful book that is called The Life and Times of Gunnery Sergeant Jackson Mason, The Quest for Freedom. It's written by a terrific author by the name of Mark Jordan. This gripping sci-fi adventure follows the rise of Jackson Mason from a young Marine to a powerful leader in a galactic community. Join us as we explore his heroic journey filled with action, relationships, and a relentless pursuit of freedom. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Mark, thanks so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
You're welcome. It's good to see you, Logan.
Good to see you as well, my friend. This is quite a character you have created in Gunnery Sergeant Jackson Mason. Have you modeled him after someone you might have known in your career or in your life?
He's probably the accumulation of several characters that I've known in my life. A lot of influence in his creation. Like I said, he's kind of a pile of several characters, and believe it or not, one of them is probably my father as well.
Wonderful. Well, that's a great tribute to your father because it's such a wonderful character. Let's give the folks at home an overview of the story.
Okay, pretty simply, Jackson Mason, Gunnery Sergeant Jackson Mason, gets involved in a very, very awful intergalactic war. In the book, it gives you the start of the war. And as he goes through, and I mean, the Earth Alliance has 3 years of just a terrible time of it until they land on a particular planet. And that is the point of the book where his life really changes. But the book basically covers, as you stated, his rise, how his rise occurs, and his rise to this eventually Joint Forces commander. He deals with a lot of, he's good with his comrades. Even his commanders really have great faith in him and know him very well. Some of them that he met as he rose, they met him when he was still a gunnery, a pretty beat up and bloodied gunnery sergeant, without giving too much of the book away. Obviously, they fought a very, very god-awful and critical battle. And that's what started his rise. And through the course of his and their battling back in this book, he's always had a doubt about how the war started. And he confirms that doubt. And he confirms, as it states in the introduction of the book, he confirms the god-awful corporate and political corruption that has created this war. And as the book progresses, he has to make a decision, you know, who am I sworn to protect? Who is my loyalty to? Is it to these people, or is it to my comrades, my buddies, my brothers, my sisters, my battle buddies? And even at some point, you know, he actually, after everything that's happened to him, he actually kind of sees things from the side of both sides. And there is a very telling, the chapter in the book that is kind of, there are like 4 turning points in this book. If you read the book, you can probably name them. Yeah. Obviously, the battle. And then the path to peace is a major turning point. Sheep in wolf's clothing is a major turning point. And then the weight of the lance is a very important turning point in his life, because he suddenly becomes the very people he addressed in A Path to Peace. And he has to come to grips with that. And that pretty much takes you through the 4 main points of the book. I mean, obviously, I've written a lot of different characters in there deliberately. Yep. There are some of them that will be basically kind of confined to the first book. There are many of them that will come through the second and third book, and there are some of them that will come all the way through the fourth. At this point in time, I have the second book manuscript is complete, awaiting editing. The third book manuscript is complete, awaiting editing, and I'm about halfway through the fourth book.
Wonderful.
So, if we can get this thing rolling, there's going to be a whole 4-book series here. And I think most people and I classify this as a science fiction action adventure is probably the best way to classify it. I know it's very hard to pick those key words.
Exactly, yeah. It's hard sometimes to pick the genre when it kind of fulfills a lot of them, but I think you've hit the nail on the head there. How much of this book is inspired by today's world? I mean, you have corporate stooges in there, you have scheming politicians. Is it inspired by the political backdrop and the corporate backdrop of today, at least in part?
Maybe a little bit, but here's a little tidbit for you. And this is the absolute truth. I still have the poor man's copyright in my closet, where you stick the registered mail label on it and mail it to yourself. You know what the date on that registered mail is? January 23rd, 1996.
I was going to say 1989. Okay.
But, it was. So, it comes to what I call the wheel of time.
Right.
And that is part of my history, has been a good part of my interest. Military history, obviously, some of it. But if you look at the history of the world, empires rise and empires fall, from the Akkadian Empire to present day. And if you look at the causes of those falls and those rises, they are always identical. And one of the biggest causes of an empire's fall, there are 2 huge causes. One is overexpansionism. Think about it. Look what happens to a nation's debt. Look what happens to a nation's needs when they overexpand. And if you look at history, what has brought down every major empire? What did they do that eventually led to their downfall? They expanded their borders and their reach too far. And then it collapsed from the inside out. So in a way, it's kind of a wheel of time type of inspiration and story. Obviously, there are a lot more in there. But that is probably a good route.
Without a doubt. Let me ask you this. You have 4 books that are either written or coming. Have you envisioned this as a TV series or a series of films?
Not really, not at this point. And it's interesting because I've had some of the people who have reviewed it say, it's similar to the Star Wars or the Star Trek or this or that type of story. And that kind of makes me step back and go, oh, really? Because I've used a little bit more physics in this story. Right. And I've used, nobody in this story has any special superhuman powers. The only powers that people in this story have are their wits, their training, and their abilities. Now, in the second book, there is a little different alien race encountered that has a little bit different physicality, and it comes into great play in the second book and for the rest of the story. But they don't have any superpowers. Yeah. It's like and I'll kind of give away a little bit of the second book. When Mason first meets the empress of this other race, she wants to see new people alone, just her and them in her receiving chambers. And the president, and I'll blow a little bit more, but his upper commander is a little uncomfortable with this because obviously he's one of the better commanders. Yeah. Well, her secret is that her species is very scent and taste oriented. So she can pick up on the pheromones and the sense of a person with the changes of their moods. That's why she wants to see them alone, because she can tell real quick if they're giving her a line or if they're genuine. Yeah. And so that gives you some hint into that particular species. She has no superpower. It's just, she doesn't have telepathy. She's just equipped differently. And her race has learned to use that that extrasensory of their their sense of smell and taste to evaluate those they deal with. Because let's face it, Logan, you and I both know that when a person is either lying or nervous or trying to deceive you, whether you know it or not, and this is why everybody says, well, the dogs can figure them out. That's one reason they can.
Right.
You give off certain pheromones when you can't help it. It's your natural heredity. It's your
Body chemistry. Yeah.
And this particular character is able to pick those up. So that just gives you an indication into the second book of some of it. But yeah, the way I've built this little galaxy, this becomes a galactic community, and they have their wild, wild west. And it's like I told my wife and a couple other people a while back, I said, what I really find interesting is I don't know that I will pursue it, but once this 4 books come out and the series is out and people read it and look at it, there are 100 different stories in that galaxy. Yeah. There are more than that. I mean, there are dozens of individual and other stories that could be written in that galaxy when I'm done with it.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of world creation, of course, that you have unlimited potential because it's a whole new world. This book is terrific. It is called The Life and Times of Gunnery Sergeant Jackson Mason, The Quest for Freedom. It's written by a wonderful author by the name of Mark Jordan. It is a gripping sci-fi adventure that follows the rise of Jackson Mason from a young Marine to a powerful leader in a galactic community. You will love this book. It's an absolute page turner. The good news is it's book 1 of 4 books that are to come. Mark, thanks so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
You're welcome.
I appreciate
it, Logan.
I appreciate your time, sir. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.